Hi, welcome to the first video in Racket for Pythonistas. Today we're going to go over math, Booleans, strings, lists, and dictionaries. And so this is going to be completely comprehensive, just kind of go over some of the one-to-ones that you can do between Racket and Python, as well as highlighting some of the differences. So let's get started. So the first thing is math. And math is in Python. This is typically how you see math being written. So this is called infix notation, and so that means that the operators for math are in between the different integers. And in Racket, they use reverse Polish notation. So the functions are actually in parentheses, and the first element in the parentheses is the actual function. But other than that, they work exactly the same. So when you need to train multiple math operators together, you can do it this way in Python, and in Racket you do it this way. So the way that it works in Racket is the innermost parentheses will resolve first, and then the outermost parentheses. So in this case, 8 times 6 is 48, and then it'll add 48 to 12, and then you'll get 60. For Booleans, you have true and false in Python, and in Racket, there's just pound T and pound F, and then also in Racket, anything that is not false is true. So that's just one thing that can be useful when you're configuring Boolean logic. In Python, this is how you write strings. In Racket, you write them in a very similar way. The only thing is that in Python, you can use single quotes for strings. In Racket, there is only double quotes. If you need to escape double quotes, or if you need to escape anything in Racket, you can use the backslash, and the same thing as in Python. For appending strings together, in Python, you can just concatenate them using the plus. In Racket, you call a function. Same thing for getting a slice of a string at just like one index. In Python, you can use this bracket notation. In Racket, you call a function, which takes the string and then the index that you want. For doing some formatting where you insert a value into a string, in Python, you can call .format. It'll go into this little bracket right here. In Racket, you have to do this little tilde a will do the same thing, and then the tilde n's are the same as /n, and you just call it using the printf function. So to get the length of a string in Racket, you do string length, and this is the same as calling len on a string in Python. To get a substring or a slice of a string in Python, you can use this bracket notation again, and in Racket you call a function. And then also to just print out in Racket, it's the same as in Python. You use print, except obviously this one uses parentheses, and this one you call a function with the parameters print. But in Racket, there's also the print function, but print line works like how you would expect it to in Python, where it prints onomatopoeia, and then it'll put a new line under it. That's the same as doing print line in Racket. So now moving on to lists. So obviously Racket is a scheme, so lists are very prevalent. These aren't all the things that you can do in lists, but kind of gives you a good overview. So to create a list in Python, you can just do menu is equal and then bracket, then all the things that you want on the list. In Racket, you use define to create a variable, so define menu, and then this is how you make a list in Racket. So single quote, and then parentheses, and then all the elements you want. You don't need to have a comma. So this single quote is what tells Racket, hey, this first element is not actually going to be a function. It's going to just be a list of items. So that's how you do that. To reference a item in an index, or an item at a certain index, in Python you would use the bracket notation again. In Racket, you call a function. To get the length, you call the length function, and you use len in Python. To get the last element in a list, you can use -1 in Python in bracket notation, and in racket you will have to call the last function. There's also you can use first to get the first element in a list. And then just removing things from lists. So in Python, this is kind of like what I was talking about in the introduction video with the difference between mutation and non-mutation. And Python, when you call menu.remove bacon, it's going to remove bacon from this list, but menu is forever changed. In Racket, when you call the remove function of bacon on menu, it's going to return back a completely new list that has bacon removed. So it's going to just be egg, sausage, and spam. But if you were to look in a menu, it would still contain all of the elements. And so this is only going to remove the first instance of bacon in menu in Racket, and this is the same thing in Python. So if we were to create another menu that has another instance of eggs in it, so it's going to look like this, which would be the same thing as doing this in Python. We can kind of test some of the other functionality. So if you call remove star with a list that contains the element that you want, it will be removed. All instances of that will be removed from the list in Racket. And so that's actually the same as doing this list filter and then giving it a lambda function that has the parameter that you want to remove and then the menu. These are actually really similar, and if you understand what's going on here, then you can kind of understand what how Racket works with trying not to mutate things when you're calling functions. So if you want to remove all instances of eggs and bacon, you can just create a list that has eggs and has bacon, and then it'll remove that from the menu. And in Python, you would do it like this. And then just some last things about lists. If you are looking for membership in Python, you can do you can use in, and in Racket you will call a function. And then if you want to concatenate lists together in Python, you can do list plus list. In Racket you'll call the append function, and then so this list function is just another way of creating a list. So this will just be a list of green eggs, and this will be a list of and ham, and then append will just make this green eggs and ham, same like this. And then lastly, you can reverse a list. You call the function reverse. It's the same as doing this, but again, there's no mutation. And then finally, we have dictionaries. So in Python, you can create a dictionary like this, and you can give it a key and a value, key, value, key, value. In Racket, you can do the same thing where you can create a dictionary, and then you give it a here's the dictionary, you call this hash set function, you give it a key, you give it a value, key, value, same thing. The thing is this is a mutable dictionary or hash, and so what that means is that you can update the keys, you can update the values, you can do all that sort of stuff just like you could in Python. But Racket also has another way of creating dictionaries, which is, from what I understand, what I know is, I don't really think there's a way of doing this in Python where you can create an immutable dictionary. And so what that means is that once you create this dictionary, once you define backpack to have all these things in it, that's all the things that can be in the backpack. There's nothing else. And you'll actually get an error if you try to mutate this dictionary, whereas you won't in Python. And then lastly, just to reference keys, you can look at hash.keys. This is going to return back all the keys. It's the same thing as doing dot keys in Python. And then if you're looking for a specific key in a dictionary, you can use hash has key in Racket, and it's the same as doing dot keys in Python. So that's how to work with dictionaries, lists, strings, math, and some Booleans in Racket. And I would encourage you to, now that you've kind of seen some of the similarities and the differences, to kind of sort of think about how that would change the way that you program in one language over the other, where like in Python you might be able to do this bracket notation. In Racket you're doing you're calling these functions that do the same things. And then also in a lot of ways in Racket you aren't mutating lists when you're removing things, when you're adding things, um, and in Python you are. So yeah, I would just kind of think about that because these differences come with their own pros and cons, and also will really help you grow as a programmer as you start to learn why you might use one in one situation over the other. And so, lastly, I just kind of want to run this script that I made, and just so you can see some of the output, and so you can see when I run it. Um, I've run it multiple times, but you can kind of see that what the expressions are evaluating to. Truth is evaluating to truth. All these strings are evaluating. In Python, you could see that these would actually disappear. You would just see the double quotes. So in Racket, you still see them, but again, you're doing your string concatenation. You're doing your substrings, um, and I'll have all this linked in the video description, where you can go and download the code and play with it, and do anything that you want with it. But thank you, and I hope you learned something.